Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency, 504-556-0809 or davemietteINSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
Cnc Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, Cnc provides patient-centered care for your entire family. Cnc Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher, and over the next hour, we do what we always do. We cover all the home teams, the New Orleans Saints, the New Orleans Pelicans, the LSU Tigers, and Tulane Green Wave. But we got a lot to talk about. Breaking it down for us, one of my favorite guests. He's a cohort of mine over at 106.1 FM. I joined those guys, and of course, CrestCitySports.com. If you're not looking at CrestCitySports.com on a daily basis, you're not keeping up with local sports. Jude Young joins us tonight on the program. Jude, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good to have you back. We were
great.
talking about before the show. I looked when I keep. I'm one of those guys that keep all my text messages, right? Mm-hmm. So when I scrolled up, I went, man, it's been since September. So I've had Jude on. That's just too long. So I'm glad you're back.
It's great to be back, and it's a busy time of year, so there's plenty to talk about, especially with the compressed sports schedule because of what happened earlier in the year. We've got high school playoffs. We're big on high school at Crescent City Sports. Starting next week, we have a lot of information coming in on that, including scheduling. So check that out and keep abreast of it at Crescent City Sports. Obviously, with the Saints and the trials and tribulations of LSU, Tulane surging late in the season, and now the Pelicans draft, the big trade this week. We've got it all at Crescent City Sports, and we also talk about it, as you mentioned, on 106.1 FM, all access. It's either yours truly or Ken Trahan, weeknights at 6 o'clock following Inside New Orleans with Eric Asher. It's great to have that block in the afternoon and early evening, so please continue to tune into that, because between those two shows, those 3 hours during the week, you get a lot of great information. And also at Crescent City Sports, we've got 2 high school football games in the Catholic League coming up this week, including one on CST that we're producing. It's Brother Martin versus John Curtis. If Brother Martin wins, they can win their first district title in 13 years, so that's really big for them. And then we'll have Jesuit and Rummel streaming on the website. That could be part of the district title up for grabs for Rummel if John Curtis wins. Jesuit surging late in the season, so 2 really good games. You can watch that at 11 a.m. on Saturday.
Yeah, and again, wall-to-wall coverage of all local sports at CrestCitySports.com. Got to check it out for sure. Well, Jude, we got a lot to talk about. I mean, again, I was debating, okay, in the first block, what do we go with? Saints, as we always do, Pelicans because of the draft. We'll go with Saints, especially, again, with the situation with Drew Brees. Brees got a second opinion yesterday. Nothing has changed. 5 broken ribs, collapsed lung. Also, the throwing shoulder has some issues as well. We saw the K-tape on the throwing shoulder. Some are saying 2 to 3 weeks. I think that is a little bit ambitious, to say the least. Maybe 4 to 6 when you're talking about the healing of the ribs, everything else that has to happen here. The question I have is, do you put him, if you're Peyton, do you put him on IR? I mean, that's the first question. Do you open up another roster spot to maybe bring in another quarterback, or again, to have that roster spot, to have another player that could be on the active roster.
I could easily see that happening, and I think you're right. I think the minimum is 4 weeks. So right now, Peyton's trying to play a little bit of cat and mouse and make the Falcons think that Drew Brees is somehow available. Nobody's buying it. But at the same time, if you know if it's at least 4 weeks and you don't need the roster spot right now, you can wait another week and then go with the 3-week IR situation. Look, as far as getting him back, first 100% between the shoulder, the lung issue, healing the ribs properly, you've got to take your time and be 100% sure so that you can have him fresh and 100% for the stretch run and nothing less. But you do need to get him back at least by the season finale. You've got to have one game under his belt before you throw him into the playoffs, where more than likely, although the Saints very much in it for home field advantage, more than likely the Saints are going to be playing that first week with 7 teams now in each conference making the playoffs. If Green Bay doesn't lose this weekend to Indianapolis, it's with the tiebreaker in hand against the Saints. It's far more likely that the Packers will be the #1 seed based on their remaining schedule. So at that point, you want to win the division, and the Bucs are certainly going to continue breathing down your neck, but you're a game ahead in the loss column. Make it 2 with the tiebreaker. As long as you win the division, I don't think it really matters where you're seated at that point. Otherwise, you either be 2 or 3. So you watch that based on how the 2 other quarterbacks perform, which is a big topic of discussion to get to. But at the same time, I think when it comes down to it, we're not going to see Drew Brees until at the very earliest, maybe that Christmas Day game against the Vikings. You've got to be sure he's healthy.
Yeah, I agree with you. You don't rush him back. No matter what is going on, you do not rush him back at this point. Also, I've been one of those guys that have been really, on the fence about him retiring. Thinking that, again, that maybe he'd want to come back, especially considering, again, he's still playing at a high level. When you see something happening like this to him at 41, and you look at, again, last year with the injuries, this year with the injury, you kind of start thinking that maybe, again, this probably is the swan song.
Right, and he's taken some tough hits during the season before and not had the kind of injury issues that he said had already been accumulating.
Yes.
So beyond the shoulder we already knew about. At this point, it's hard to imagine he's not going to slip into TV while the getting is good.
Yep.
It seems like Chris Collinsworth, for example, at NBC might be looking towards transitioning out as well. He's got his son working for the network now, so he's got that NBC deal set up, and it looks like Mike Tirico sooner than later will be taking over for Al Michaels. I think Brees wants to get in there, at least as a studio analyst, and put him in the catbird seat to be able to be the next guy. Now, that's assuming they actually keep Sunday Night Football. If you follow the TV negotiations going on, they may not even happen. But Brees does have a TV deal. I can't imagine NBC won't have the NFL, and I think he wants to get to it and secure that spot, especially off the field, if we remember what happened during the offseason.
Yes.
I don't think he wants to fool around with that anymore. If they don't win the Super Bowl this year, it doesn't matter. I think he's out, win or lose.
Yeah. And then, again, some people have always questioned Brees' toughness, right? I mean, I don't think you can question his toughness.
No.
3 broken ribs against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, goes into that Frisco game with 3 broken ribs and the shoulder injury, ends up with, again, 5 broken ribs and the collapsed lung. Oh, my God. I don't know how he continued to play on that last series when he fumbles the ball at the goal line, and picking the ball up, the torque to turn and throw, and then to get the ball to Kamara. And I think there were a couple plays earlier where literally, again, after the ribs, he had the 5 ribs that were broken, he got pushed. I mean, just amazing resilience on the part of Brees to deal with, again, that type of pain and still stay in the game.
It's toughness and it's adrenaline at the
Yes,
time.
true.
You're in the heat of the battle. As soon as he got to the locker room, I'm sure it all kicked in for him, and he knew that he couldn't play anymore. So, yeah, part of it is adrenaline, but there's no question he's a tough guy. He's stepped up into the pocket and made his bones being a pocket passer for all these years for a Hall of Fame career. His toughness should never be questioned. It's his arm strength, but never how tough he is.
Right. 24-17 winners over the 49ers last week. They've now won 6 in a row, but it's like a MASH unit. 13 players on the injury list as of Wednesday. We'll see how that kind of plays out throughout the weekend on who is going to be available. The next question is the biggest question, not just in the city, but the entire NFL. Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill? I am of the opinion it will be Jameis Winston, but I think it will be different this year than what we saw last year with Teddy Bridgewater. I think we're going to get a heavy dose of Taysom Hill. That's why I'm wondering if there will be another quarterback that'll be brought in, because remember last year we didn't see a lot of Taysom Hill when Teddy Bridgewater took over because he became the number 2 quarterback. I believe that Winston will start, but it would not surprise me, just to throw a monkey wrench at teams, if Taysom Hill comes out and takes the first snap to throw things off. I think we look at it with Brees out, Peyton's going to have some flexibility there, but I do think Winston is the starter going in. I'd love to get your opinion.
I'm not so sure. I think it will definitely be different from what happened with Teddy Bridgewater last season, but I'm not so sure it's going to be entirely different as far as how these two quarterbacks are played. I think Sean Payton believes that he can win with Jameis Winston, with the offense, with the weapons in place, with Winston's track record of when he's good, he's really good.
Yes.
I think the changes are going to come. I think he gets the preponderance of the snaps. You may see the reduction because now Taysom Hill is the true needed backup. I think that may happen again. What I think will be different is you're not going to see the like for like that we saw last year. Teddy Bridgewater is much closer to Drew Brees in the way he plays than what we have with Jameis Winston now. He can be a game manager, can Bridgewater. I don't think you ask Winston to do that. I thought Winston was being overly cautious and wasn't comfortable with the lead coming in last week in that situation against the 49ers because he did what he had to do. And that's really good because it shows a real sign of maturity. He didn't overreact. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was doing his job to try to win the game, which is something he needs to do to have a long-term career at this point. But at the same time, he looked uncomfortable. He took a couple of sacks in a row in the red zone at one point. He looked like he wasn't comfortable with one particular situation where he hesitated and threw into coverage and almost had an interception. So you need to design the offense now with a full week in hand so that Winston plays, gets into a rhythm, and he's comfortable because there's no guarantee Brees is going to come back, and I don't think you can win anything if it's not Jameis Winston as far as if you have to use a different quarterback in January. But I do think they'll attack down the field more. There are a lot of weapons there. This offense will become more vertical. It'll still be very important to run the ball because I think play action is more important for a quarterback that has a big arm that you want to try to stretch the field with to have that balance and back defenses off. I think it's going to be Winston heavily just like it was Bridgewater last year, but I think fans might be excited at times. The big play might come back to the offense that doesn't have so much to do with dumping it off to Alvin Kamara.
I agree 100%. I do think that he's got to be Bridgewater 2.0 in terms of taking the care of the football, and that goes against a lot of the things that we've seen in his career with Winston. But I do agree. Let the playmakers make plays, get the ball to them. He doesn't have to win the game. He's got playmakers that win the game. But I do think that Peyton is going to take advantage of the ability to stretch the field. He loves shock and awe when Brees had the ability to get the ball downfield. So I really believe he's going to take advantage of his arm. Now, again, with that, Winston has to make the right decisions.
Right. No, there's no question. But it's really important to point out how important that is for Winston to be in a position regularly to make the right decisions. If the defense is scared that you're going to take the top off of them now, that backs people off on the first and second level. And that'll make it easier for Winston to execute that part of the offense, the more West Coast short and intermediate passing. Because if you're backing off those safeties, you're creating more spaces so that it's easier to make those throws. Absolutely. And you still have the ultimate decoy and ultimate weapon at the same time in Alvin Kamara on the field. So it should be really easy for Winston to be successful. And I think you get two really great opponents right off the bat. I don't love you playing the Falcons off after a bye necessarily, but their defense isn't good. And then next week, even though you have to go on the road, you're talking about Denver. That's a team that's falling apart, injuries, bad quarterback situation. So you've got a chance to really get Winston going here and go after a couple of teams. And if you do that, then you can be much more comfortable with wins, resting Drew Brees, and building up Winston just in case you need him.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say as far as Taysom Hill goes, he's been fumbling the ball a lot lately. He's got to start taking care of the football. I like, again, this power running game with the quarterback where, again, you're bringing in the extra offensive lineman and you're getting some blocking downfield. I think, again, he's excelling at that. Also, again, now the ability to maybe, again, throw a little trickeration at him and throw the football, okay? Keep him honest out there. And I think that's something that we'll see. But to your point, I think it's going to be interesting to see. Will they do what I'm saying, where we'll see a heavy dose of Taysom, more than we saw last year, rather? Or, again, will we see a carbon copy we saw last year where he becomes the number 2 quarterback and you see less of him within the offense? I think they lose something if they don't utilize his skill set in the running game.
Right. It's a great question because you have to ask, you mentioned bringing in another quarterback. Who are you going to bring in who could really play? If you somehow overuse Taysom Hill and he's injured, then you're really up a creek. There's no doubt about it. So I think they want to be very careful about that. And I think part of it is that the schedule does dictate, at least early on, that you've got time here in games you think you should be able to win with a quarterback who started 70 games in the NFL, threw for over 5,000 yards and 33 touchdowns last year. How do you not go with that guy in an offense that's built for a pocket pro style passer? The transition to Taysom Hill, if it ever happens, can't happen until an off season after Drew Drew Brees is gone, and you have to build a quarterback room that fits that. The Saints are built for a pocket passing, pro-style, West Coast built team with some Air Coryell principles that we should now see more of, that vertical game with Winston at quarterback.
Let's talk about the other side of the ball now on defense. They're playing at a high level the last few weeks. We've seen the mistakes that have plagued them early kind of dissipate. To me, it's got to be a carbon copy of what we saw last year out of this defense when Brees went down. They've got to take their game to the next level now. They seem to be coming into their own. And again, when you look at the rest of this schedule over the next few weeks, Atlanta, as you mentioned, at Denver, Atlanta, then at Philadelphia, they still have the ability to be able to do that at a high level. Again, the biggest problem with this defense has been the mistakes, the mental mistakes they've made. Good thing that has happened recently is they're getting a pass rush, and that has helped the second and third levels of defense. The addition of Quan Alexander, I think, showed last week that he puts more speed on the field and he opens up Demario Davis to be more of a playmaker, which helps them as well. I like the direction of the defense. Hopefully we'll continue to see them in that direction. Your thoughts?
It's easy to like the direction of the defense because, as you mentioned, the mental errors seem to be going away. Finally, for a secondary that's full of veterans, that should be the case.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's making their lives easier. Far less time to have to cover because the pass rush has really found itself. And it played against Tampa Bay like you expected to see it play against a lot of teams, and it needs to continue going forward. They weren't as good in a letdown spot against the 49ers off the Bucs win, but at the same time, they got their acts together. They did benefit from a couple of muffed punts in the turnover battle, and they wound up winning that. But at the same time, they were better as the game went on and getting off the field on third down. Sure, and part of that is because they're able to get to the quarterback. David Onyemata's not getting the credit for having a fantastic year, but all the statistics tell you that he's in the top 10 amongst defensive tackles and rushing the passer. So his emergence has been huge. A good investment by the Saints, seeing that this was a guy born in Nigeria, late to football, played college ball in Canada. So he's come along slowly, and now at age 28, slowly but surely is becoming the player they hoped he would be when they took him in the third round.
More patient with him than they were with Hicks, right?
Right, but at the same time, I think they knew this player was far more raw. Hicks had that little bit of a background being a bit raw, but he had played football his whole life. And at the same time, he's also a great character guy, which the Saints tried to fill their locker room with, so it was easy to do that. But that was important. The edge pass rush is there. Even with Cam Jordan continuing mostly to have a down year, you're getting it from other sources. And I think the big emergence of a healthy Marcus Davenport, there's no question the difference he's made being in that rotation, with Trey Hendrickson being a guy that at the very least can be a real force as a pass rusher on third down. If you have pass rush, it covers up a lot of warts on the back end. You can attack more. And you mentioned the Quan Alexander addition. I think what really stands out there is because he's so versatile, you talked about Demario Davis being able to do more. You can mix him in as a blitzer. You can use him as in coverage. And people don't know when it's going to come because both of those guys can do that. But Davis in particular is such a good blitzer. I think he blitzed 9 times against San Francisco and made a difference, including a sack on 6 of them. So that's the type of thing you want to have in your back pocket, not have to rely on a regular basis. When you use it, it's a weapon. Same thing with C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Because Quan Alexander is so good in space, short, intermediate areas, you can play a little bit more zone and hide those coverages and then bring a guy who's your most aggressive player on your entire football team. What C.J. Gardner-Johnson can do as a blitzer, we started to see for the first time this week, and we're going to see more of it.
I agree. And that was where I was going to go next. Allen now, again, because of Alexander, has the ability to utilize the skill set of his players in different ways that maybe we saw early, and hopefully that will continue going forward. Look, you beat Atlanta, you put pressure on Matt Ryan, okay? They've got guys that can get vertical on you. Again, you look at Gurley at running back. Again, he's he seems like he's running hard. But if you can put pressure on Matt Ryan, you can stymie that offense of the Atlanta Falcons.
Right. Gurley's running hard, but he's not the same player.
He's not close.
Very odd signing for the money that they paid him in the offseason. Atlanta's averaging 3.7 yards a carry. They're not a dynamic running game, and unlike a matchup against a dual-threat quarterback or San Francisco that has the best run scheme in the league, Atlanta's very basic, You know what's coming,
Yep.
and the Saints should have great success stopping the run and being in favorable down and distance situations. And it's going to come down to, can they get after the quarterback? Calvin Ridley still on the injury report after a bye. He's killed the Saints since coming into the league, so you'd love it if he's not able to play, but I'm guessing he'll find his way on the field. Atlanta's last gasp at trying to make a playoff run. They've got to win this week. They should be undefeated under their interim coach and Raheem Morris. If Todd Gurley takes a knee at the 1-yard line like he was supposed to, they would be. So they're confident, and they came into town last year and beat up on the Saints.
That's right.
And they remember that, and I think so did the Saints. So you're going to get the best effort from both teams.
But you always do. I mean, you
Sure, the rivalry.
This is always a tough game. The other part of it is, and I don't want to walk away from the Saints without talking about the special teams, because they have been among the best in the league, not just in terms of returns, but also in coverage. Harris has been a weapon in terms of flipping the field. Again, the Saints are winning that when you look at the offense, defense, special teams, they're winning special teams every single week.
Right, and that was the goal. Along this time of playoff failures, the goal was very important, and I think it really stuck in the craw of Sean Payton when you saw the changes in the coaching staff on special teams after the NFC Championship game. When that fake punt was successful, that was so important for the Rams being able to pull that thing off, as well as the guys in stripes. But special teams, that one play made a difference, and the Saints have been winning games and improving their special teams, but Sean Payton wants to have as good a special teams as you can have, and they don't have the best in the league. I think Miami may have that title right now, but the Saints are certainly top 3, top 5, and you don't want to lose games because of special teams, and at the same time you can come away with by taking advantage of mistakes, always being there in the right place. Just because a guy muffs a punt doesn't mean you're going to recover it. Marcus Callaway, who I think you're going to see a lot more as a receiver this week, and talk about a guy who we haven't seen as a deep threat but was in college.
Right.
Maybe Jameis Winston unlocks that as well. But he's out there getting down there first and making plays because you had Justin Hardy being injured, so he's stepping up. And that's part of why guys like that get a chance to make the roster, because they will contribute on special teams. And if you're lucky, they wind up stepping up on offense like Harris and Callaway have too.
As far as the coaching staff goes, I got to believe that Peyton's got to be just excited right now about the opportunity with the lump of clay with Winston within this offense to do a little more, to do more than maybe what he was doing with Breeze, and to keep teams off balance now. It's almost again like, okay, I got a blank sheet here. I can come in and the tendencies that maybe we would have with Breeze, you can't have those tendencies. Don't equate anymore to what we're doing now.
Right, and you're making lemonade out of lemons with that theme. But you're right, it's more than just that. I think Sean Payton's excited about the ability to be able to attack people as well. And remember, he's got a background going back to Dallas in particular. This is the one that really stands out, where he was able to work with a young Tony Romo.
Yes.
And I think there's going to be some connections there. If you're wondering, you want to go look and see what the Saints offense might look like for a while with Winston taking most of the snaps, it could be like that Tony Romo offense, where it was a mix of, hey, we're moving the ball properly here and trying to have the high completion passes, but at the same time we're taking shots and we're getting one-on-one matchups. So it's an easy decision for the quarterback to say, we've set this up, now you just have to make a throw. I think it is going to be exciting to see how that can pay off, and it should pay off right away against the Falcons, because I don't care about them coming out of a bye. You caught them preparing behind the scenes for 1 week for another matchup with Drew Brees, and now they had to scrap that and wonder what they're going to get. That should play out as an advantage to the Saints that should lead to some big plays in the game.
You like the Saints this weekend against Atlanta?
I do. I think a lot of people are leaning the other way, thinking about the Breeze loss and the rivalry and how close the games have been. I think this is a real spot for the Saints to be refocused. Again, you're right about the rivalry. Both teams are going to come to play, but the Saints are on a winning streak, thinking long term, while the Falcons are desperate and always hungry to beat the Saints, especially in that kind of role. Now you have the Saints thinking, people are doubting us. They think we're going to lose to a team with a losing record because we lost Drew Brees, but we're a complete team and we want to show it. There are plenty of leaders in that locker room, and they will rally around Winston in particular to help make that happen.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the game on Sunday. All right, we're going to take a quick break here from our underwriters. We come back, we'll touch on the Pelicans, talk about the draft, talk about the Drew Holiday trade. Then we'll get into Tulane, LSU, all that coming up here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Our guest today is Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com. I'm your host, Eric Asher. We'll be right back.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com and All Access 106.1 FM is our guest. We switched gears and talked about the Pelicans, and boy, we had a lot to talk about when it comes to the Pelicans. First of all, again, the Pelicans traded Drew Holiday, and they get guard Eric Bledsoe, George Hill, and 3 first-round picks and 2 pick swaps back in that deal. Bledsoe is 31 years old. George Hill is 34 years old. The picks as they came down is last night they got the 2020 first-round pick from Milwaukee through Indiana. They have a 2024 right to swap pick, a first-round pick. 2025 is a first-round pick unprotected. 2026 is a right to swap, that's the pick swap. And then 2027 is a first-round unprotected pick. Bledsoe will be 31 by the time the season starts. His deal has 3 years left on it. $16 million, $18 million, and $19 million. The last year that deal is not fully guaranteed. Again, you look at him as a guard. He's not a bad guard. He's a slasher, get to the basket. Not a great shooter, but an elite defender. He is a combo guard. George Hill, 34 years old, 12-year veteran, 2 years left on his deal. $9 million this year, $10 million the following year, but that's only guaranteed for about $1.5 million in terms of George Hill. Veteran leader. A guy that could be a Rajon Rondo type on this team as far as a mentor to the young players if he stays around. He had 9 points on a game on 21 minutes with the Bucks last year. And it'll be interesting to see again how that kind of plays out. First of all, are those 2 players going to be on this roster when they open up the season on December the 22nd? And then if not, again, what will they get for those players? Because this is a very fluid situation with the draft last night, which we'll get into in a few minutes. And then, of course, what happened with this particular trade. As soon as you heard the trade, your first impressions?
Sounded like they had a haul. It sounded like they were able to get a mix of valuable veterans that you can keep and play, or you can deal off at any time because they do have value around the league, decent contracts, proven to be effective players on winning teams, and just having more ammo for the future. Just having as many picks, pick swap situations as possible to take advantage of whatever may come up that you can use to try to improve your roster. So I love the combination for a guy that you really were only going to have one more year in Drew Holiday. You took advantage of a team in Milwaukee that's desperate to get it right and try to win. They want to sign Giannis long term. He wants to win, so they had to improve their lineup. And yes, they're getting rid of a guy in Bledsoe who's been so good defensively. He's been all NBA, first team, but hasn't shown up in the playoff games. So they're looking for a different guy that may be able to provide that in Holiday. I don't know how the fit's going to be when he's slated to be their actual starting point guard right now. It'd be interesting to see how they work that out. That may not be the best playing situation for him, even though he's on a contender. But for New Orleans, you get a guy in value back that can play with Bledsoe, that you can mix in with the right lineups and have some advantages. He can help you shut down certain dangerous guards. He can give you the ability to be able to run even more because he's very good in transition. And unlike Holiday, he finishes much better at the rim, and he's a more reliable free throw shooter. And then you have Hill, who is considered a point guard, but what he can do is he can play off the ball, and throughout his entire career, he's in his mid-30s now. The thing is, he can shoot. He's gotten better and better. Last year, 46% from three-point range. Because what are we going to see from this team? As much as you and I have talked about, yeah, you'd like to see them find alphas, you know, leaders on this team. We've mentioned it for a couple of years now. Now they have to find out whether Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson, are they going to be these alphas? Because they're going to put the ball in these guys' hands constantly to initiate the offense and see what they can do and see how they can handle playing and I think leading as well day in, day out. So that's why they're going to be careful about who else they might try to bring in until they figure out exactly how much these guys can do as far as shouldering the load. That's what I expect. I'm guessing that Bledsoe and Hill may stick around for a while because they can help you put together a team that gets to the playoffs. That's the next goal. It doesn't matter that Bledsoe's not good against elite teams once you get there. He can help you get there, and you save money and brought in assets by giving Drew Holiday what he wanted, which was a chance to play for a team that can win a championship now.
Moving on, and I agree with everything you just said. Okay, now it'll be interesting to see again because of the log jam at point guard right now what happens, and of course, you know, that's based on what we saw last night. Ball, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jackson is a restricted free agent, Frank Jackson. You had Gray, who came off of the G League and was on the roster. Bledsoe, Hill, and then last night's #1 pick, Kyra Lewis Jr. That is a log jam at the point guard position. There will be moves made to be able to move on from some of these guards on whoever it's going to be down the line here. But with that said, last night the Pelicans had multiple picks in the draft. 13 and 24 in the first round, 39, 42, and they ended up with 60 in the second round. They come out with one pick. They trade all the picks with the exception of their first pick, which was 13th overall. They picked Kyra Lewis Jr., the speedy guard out of Alabama. A little slight in size, but a guy that can get to the rim, pretty good shooter, was a really good defender in the SEC. Again, you just worry about maybe his build, but baseline to baseline, guy has got speed, okay, speed galore. 19 years old. He's another player that is very, very young. Okay, I only played 2 years at Alabama, came in as a 16-year-old into college, so again, you know he's an intelligent kid. And again, supposedly, this was a kid that they were on the entire time. This was going to be their pick. Much like we've seen Peyton in the past on the Saints side, this was a targeted deal. I thought for a second there, Dell Demp slipped into the Saints in the Pelicans facility last night because they continued the trading of picks. But obviously, again, stockpiling assets. 31 picks over the next 8 drafts. 14 of those are first-round picks, 4 pick swaps. So that's a lot of assets to be able to build this team now and into the future going forward. First of all, your thoughts on the first-round draft choice, and then we'll get into the moving of the additional picks.
Right. I have a lot to say about the strategy, and I totally agree with it. And you should have expected it if you looked at the big picture, where they're at right now as a franchise, their roster, their assets. As far as Kyra Lewis goes, this is Avery Johnson's guy.
That's right.
He was recruited to Alabama when Avery Johnson, New Orleanian, won a world championship, has been an NBA Coach of the Year. This guy knows
very close with the Bensons.
Absolutely. This guy knows point guards, and there's that connection. And I'm sure he was helping push this hard because I've seen him publicly do it. And he's thrilled that Kyra Lewis wound up being a lottery pick, and he guarantees this is going to be a really good NBA player. So you're happy about that right away. You mentioned a weakness, which is he's slight of build. Maybe he's 165, maybe he's up to 180. We don't know. That's all speculation. But we know he's slight of build, so to speak, at 6'3". So we haven't seen him be explosive as a finisher at the rim. But he does everything else really well. You can see why they like him. As a point guard, he can initiate your team. He can be really good in transition. He wound up nearly with what are over 5 assists a game. But for a guy with slight build playing in the SEC against a tough non-conference schedule last year, he actually led them in rebounding too. That was not a good Alabama team, but he had nearly 5 rebounds a game. So that tells you his quickness to get to the ball. He's only going to get stronger and more mature physically as the years go along. And you know what they have to really like about him Yeah, he can be a true point guard, but he's very good off the ball in catch and shoot situations. You look at his highlights, you look at his video, you have to love his shooting form. And he's got the ability to shoot it from NBA range already. I think he's a great fit. Comparing to another draft pick last year, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I think Lewis drafted a few spots higher, 13 versus 17. Although this is not as deep a draft,
True.
I think Lewis is a better player. I think he's going to be the better NBA player, and he's a guy who really fits because he can do a little bit of everything for you. He has the physical talent to wind up being a great defender because of his quickness. He just needs to learn that, like a lot of these young guys. And I don't know if he'll even spend that much time on the roster this year or not. He may be a D-League guy, or G-League guy, I should say, and develop there because you don't have a normal off season. You've got to pick a guy that you're like, in the end, in 3 years, he's going to be a good NBA player. With a pick that high, with the guaranteed contract, they got that. I really like Lewis's game. I think he did a fine job of carrying a bad team to at least mediocrity last year. And the whole Avery Johnson signing off on him is huge. The connections are obviously there. I think they got a player that I have more confidence in him being a long-term piece for the Pelicans than either Jackson Hayes or Nickeil Alexander-Walker as the other 2 draft picks with Zion last year.
Interesting.
He just fits.
Yeah, you know, well, last night, I mean, look, when you look at the log jam of guards on this team, okay, and of course they tried to spin it, well, it's a guard league now. It is a guard league, but you can't have an overflow of guards on your roster. Sitting there was Aaron Naismith, okay, of Vandy, best shooter in the draft, and at the small forward position, a need for this team. But again, they had their target on Kyra Lewis Jr., which again I have no issue with. If that's your guy, and you know that's your guy, and even though Naismith is there, even though you're going to go with your guy,
right?
At the end of the day, the question is again, what happens now within this team? Griff said he's not standing pat. He said that he has targets in free agency are already, they've already got their targets ready to go, and they've been in constant trade negotiations. So this roster will be in flux over the next few days. Again, remember when you start looking at the NBA free agency, it starts on tomorrow,
right.
Okay, on the 20th. So that's Friday the 20th. You can begin the legal tampering period, and normally it's like 5-6 days. It's only 2 days. The 22nd is when you can start signing free agents. So this is a quick turnaround from the draft to free agency, and obviously it's going to be a whirlwind in terms of who's going to be on the roster, who's not going to be on the roster. What do you foresee?
We can't guess what they're thinking about all these parts, particularly mentioning right away at the lead guard spot because they have so many. Some people have to go. But we can guess if the goal is to at least get this team to the playoffs this year, to have them have that experience in a deep Western Conference, you're not going to do it after already trading away Drew Holiday, who's helped you get to the playoffs before, who's a proven vet who can help you win. You're not going to do it if you have too many guys on your roster playing in the main rotation who haven't been there before. And that includes your 2 superstars already who are going to play heavy minutes, and you build your team around in Ingram and Williamson. So that really tells me, how does Lonzo Ball stay on this team? How is he on the opening night roster? I can't imagine that he is.
First thing I thought was when they picked this kid, his ball's gone.
Right, he has to go. And again, if you assume Kyra Lewis in the first year winds up being a D-League guy, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker gets more run and an opportunity to play in the second unit, you start wondering, well, the rest of the guards need to be veterans who fill in the other spots. We're not sure if J.J. Redick's going to step around, especially because they could now keep George Hill, who's not quite J.J. Redick as a gunner, but can space the floor and knock down shots.
And there's a market for J.J. Redick.
Right, there's no question there is. And Hill's on a cheap contract, so it really fits well for you long term to be able to do that. And if Redick helps you at another spot, like you mentioned, on the wings to be able to get a little bit more, that's more versatile as far as a two-way player goes, I could totally see that happening. I'm sort of expecting they're going to keep Bledsoe. I could be completely surprised. But playing a poor man's Drew Holiday role who can give you an elite defender, who has helped teams get to the playoffs, I think that's really important. And his deal is valuable, and it's only going to be more valuable if he helps you this year. And then you mentioned 2 more years left, with the final year of the 2 having just a $4 million buyout. He's cheap as a proven NBA starter, who again can be good enough to help you get through the grind of a season and get to the playoffs. So I'm anticipating they wind up keeping both he and Hill. I think that was part of the allure. Can I get guys that can be proven vets that can help us night in and night out, get enough wins to get to the postseason, so I just don't trot a bunch of kids out there to try to do it, as far as the guys who have the ball in their hands, who make key decisions down the stretch in close games.
2 more questions about the Pelicans, and I want to move on to the collegiate game. First of all, I don't want to get away without, again, talking about Drew Holiday and what he meant to this franchise. Look, it didn't start off great. He was injury prone, okay? Yeah. And then, of course, then the situation, unfortunate situation with his wife, her illness. Missed a lot of games for this team. And there was a time when I was politicking for, you got to move on from this guy. Mm-hmm. You got him in a trade. Ultimately, again, you've kind of, you've done what you can do with it. But eventually he got healthy, and eventually he endeared himself to the people of this community. And again, loved being a Pelican. Didn't force his way out like Anthony Davis did. Yes, he wanted to play for a contender. Yes, at 30 years old, you want to be in a situation in the back end of your career where you're having a chance to win a championship. Was not going to happen here. But again, he was the consummate professional his entire time here in New Orleans.
If this happens a couple of years ago in the Pelicans timeline, and they wind up having these two young stars to build around, and Drew Holiday's a couple of years younger, no way he leaves, no way he asks out, because he's in a good spot. Being a little bit later, and the time he's put in 7 years here, and everything he's been through, as you mentioned, it was time to part ways.
Yes.
It wasn't something that had to happen, but it was the right thing to do because it could benefit both sides. Look, the NBA needed to have a lemon law. They didn't punish the 76ers enough for hiding injury information. You can't blame that on Holiday. That's just bad luck for Dell Demps in that spot. And one of the things that really hurt him as far as building the team at that time,
no doubt.
Even though he didn't do a great job overall, things might have looked a lot differently if you'd have gotten the Drew Holiday you were expecting to. But he's battled.
The all-star.
Yeah, the all-star level guy. And even then, he was an Eastern all-star, but a top 50 NBA player because of his versatility. Look, he's proven that he's a tough guy, tough-minded guy. He's a class act all the way. You hate to see guys like that leave your organization, but at the same time, you give him all the credit in the world. A lot of guys who would have went through the adversity he suffered through would have fallen off a cliff.
Yep.
Not this guy. He bounced back up to be an all-NBA caliber defender again, a true starter that suddenly we were worried he wasn't going to be worth these contracts. He certainly is worth the money he's making. So the best thing you can say about him is he's unstoppable against any kind of obstacles that come in his way, and you hate to lose a guy like that because he could fit in the right situation. Timing isn't right now, and I wish him the best in Milwaukee. That's a fun organization to watch with a superstar player. I hope he wins a bunch of games.
And I give Griff a lot of credit moving him to the East, not allowing him to stay in the West where he could come back and hurt you. Final question on the Pels, just a quick answer on this one. Your thoughts on the hiring of Stan Van Gundy?
Van Gundy's the type of guy who's made teams better everywhere he's been. He's been able to deal with different situations as far as who are the star players we're building around and can we make it work. He's bringing in proven coaches, including guys he's worked with before, and I think he's going to see this team advance and be more consistent. That was the key. Not, hey, do we find the guy who's our Greg Popovich, our Steve Kerr, who's going to build multiple championship teams from here on out. That's kind of foolhardy to think you can pull that off when you have a team that just doesn't know how to win yet and its two big stars are so young. You needed to find a guy who could, again, it goes back to what have I talked about, just get me to the playoffs. Let's get to the playoffs a couple of years in a row and experience that so we can build to something when our best players wind up reaching their peak. This guy has a proven track record everywhere he's been, including being good enough to take a team to the NBA Finals with Orlando in 08. He can do it. So I think this is a good hire because you got the guy who understands the vision of what the front office is trying to do. He can do it with different types of lineups. He's going to put you in the best possible position most nights to win games because unlike Alvin Gentry, God bless him, was horrible with rotations, horrible with crunch time lineups. You will not see that from a Van Gundy coach team.
Yeah, I would agree. Good bench coach, great basketball mind, culture builder, and of course, something this team desperately needs is, again, the emphasis on defense. I thought he checked all the boxes.
Right. I agree. And in the defending part, it's the first thing he talked about. Look, you do have to be better with the basketball and in close situations. The turnovers would kill the Pelicans in close games. But at the same time, there were losses where they were done by the end of the first quarter. That can't happen on a regular basis. It'll happen sometimes in the NBA over the long haul of the schedule. But you've got to have a team that is defensively sound with a game plan night in, night out to avoid throwing away games. Just as important as it is to win the close ones, that determines whether you're going to be a playoff team and how far you can go. If you're throwing away as few games as possible, having a team ready to play night in, night out, with the depth this roster should provide for him, you've got the right kind of coach.
No, I would agree. Shifting gears to the LSU Tigers, They will take on Arkansas this Saturday, not Alabama. There's a lot of talk that, again, the Alabama game would be moved into this slot. Arkansas, LSU would be played on December the 19th. That never came to fruition. There was a players-only meeting that was called by Terrence Marshall Jr. You know, my big question is going to be, what have you done in this 2-week stretch where you have not played? I understand there's been COVID concerns, but again, you still could get a whiteboard. You could use Zoom. The biggest issue with this team right now has been on the defensive side of the ball, with again the bust, the mistakes, a lot of the not understanding the concept, what you're supposed to be doing on each and every play. That's something you get these kids in the classroom and teach them, try to go over it again so you're not having these issues in the last part of your season. That along with, again, what's going on with this team with the lack of leadership and the quitting against, in the last game against Auburn. Just very, very frustrating to watch what happened there. That's not LSU football. That's not a team that's coming off of a national championship, even though it's a new team. Again, you're still carrying that LSU across your chest. Give me your the state of LSU football right now and your thoughts of what can happen next.
Well, let's go to the leadership part, because we start with the idea, and it's set in stone, the season is completely lost.
Right.
At this point, you're thinking about the future. But at the same time, thinking about the future and the present means finding those leaders. Where have the leaders gone? They didn't have any left. Who were voted the jersey receivers of the big leadership roles, 7 and 18? A guy who's wound up being a 3rd or 4th string running back, a linebacker who's been benched in Damone Clark, and Jeremy Stevens, and part of the Jacoby Stevens, I should say. Part of the reason why they're struggling so much on defense is they're asking him to do things that he's not good at when he's supposed to be your most proven defender.
Agreed.
He should be playing in the box. He should be used like a Jamal Adams. But to have him down the field in coverage or man-to-man, he's a disaster. Bo Pelini has done a miserable job. And LSU fans may never forgive him for that opening game against Mississippi State. A horrible football team that you were embarrassed against because you coached so poorly in scheme and lack of adjustments. And it's gone downhill from there. Look, the rest of the season, I don't care what they've done in this extended bye, could be miserable. It's a situation where Arkansas is going to put up a lot of points on them. They're going to have to control the football to try to keep Arkansas's offense and any other offense they play the rest of the year off the field, but to try to keep that game within range to have a chance at it. After that, how the schedule's probably going to wind up from all the reports on what the SEC will announce after this week. You're talking about going to A&M, hosting Alabama, Florida, Ole Miss.
Right.
It would not surprise me in the least, based on what I've seen of those teams and LSU's defense, if they give up 200 total points in those final 4 games. And I don't think there's much that they're going to be able to do about it. They don't match up, and they've got to play every young guy and say the hell with it. Let's get reps for these guys to get guys ready to compete for next year and make up for some lost time.
Well, that takes me to my next question. Bo Pelini return next year?
I think it depends on how it finishes, because if the mistakes keep happening the rest of the way and you see no improvement in that area, I just don't know how Ed Orgeron could sign off on that, how he wouldn't be willing to admit a mistake. Because the way he handled the entire offseason leading into the year, I remember being on this show with you and you asked me, boy, Orgeron's really pumping up Pelini and the expectations for this defense, and we both agreed, well, he wouldn't be saying that if he didn't believe it, because you're setting them, the whole team up for miserable failure.
No doubt.
But yet, that's exactly what he did, and come to find out, we have recruits, current commitments for this upcoming signing class, talking about how Orgeron basically told them, we're not going to be good this year. He laid it out there so we'd be able to keep these commitments after things went downhill as he expected. So I don't understand handling those two situations so differently. I understand giving your team confidence going into the season, but did you really miss the problems even that severely when you should have expected to at least have a good offense? You're telling the recruits you were expecting a bad year. It must have been because of the inexperience on the defense, because the offensive talent is there. And again, outside of Auburn, playing a true freshman quarterback making his first road start, the offense hasn't been a problem. So, I mean, I'm really wondering about that. And when it comes down to it, if Pelini doesn't show the ability to adjust to what 2020 and beyond is as far as the offenses and the schemes you're going to face, then he needs to go immediately. You need to fix that problem in a hurry. And if what I just said actually happens and they're giving up 50 points a game the rest of the way, 45, 50 points a game,
fait accompli.
You have to let him go.
It's over, no doubt about it. Miles Brennan out for the season. Dane Rosenthal's suspension is lifted. He'll be available. We'll have to see again how that kind of plays out. My guess is they'll play both quarterbacks going forward. They want to see what they have.
Right, and we'll have to see if Max Johnson's available, because he may have been one of the COVID players, and he's been off the field, but maybe enough time has come back. Even then, he's rusty, so you really need to keep TJ Finley upright, have a running game, have some balance for the short term. I'll be curious to see if we saw a little bit of this a couple of years ago. Jontre Kirkland, who's been a jack of all trades, now receiver, who was a state championship winning quarterback at Lutcher. He can run a Wildcat style look. If Max Johnson isn't available or hasn't been practicing enough to be trusted to play, maybe you mix some of that in, because this may be the last truly winnable game left. Even though I think maybe, and when they went head-to-head, Arkansas handled Ole Miss in Fayetteville. Matchup-wise, this may be the last winnable game left, so they better empty the bullets out of the chamber to try to get this one, or they may not win another game until next September.
Right. Off the field, LSU has some issues. There was a scathing investigative report by USA Today that came out on Monday saying that not just LSU, the university, but the football program as well, ignoring sexual assault crimes, especially those committed by the football team. Reported at least 9 members of the football team have been involved in sexual assault. The one thing that I know that Tiger fans are worried about is, again, the NCAA coming in because of lack of institutional control. When you look at the situation with the Our Lady of the Lake, the no-show job that was for Vidal Alexander's father. You look at the situation with Will Wade being accused of paying players, and then now this situation with, again, it looks like a partial cover-up, or again, at least not doing what they needed to do to be able to protect not just the student athlete, but protect the students that were involved in these quote-unquote sexual assault, date rape type situations. So my question to you is the door open now for LSU to be able to have the NCAA and come in and do the push that lack of institutional control button on them? On the flip side, I will say this before I go to you. I say at the very least, based on what we've seen, if everything in that article is factual, there needs to be a hard look at 2 things. Number one, the Title IX violations by LSU as a university. Someone within the football program has to be held accountable here for what has happened. The sweeping under the rug, not taking this as seriously as it should have been. And if it's found that Baton Rouge Police and the district attorney's office were complicit in looking the other way here, then again, not just a grand jury should be brought up, but maybe a federal investigation into what happened here with sexual assault. And I made this point on my radio show this week. To me, if you're worried about only the football team and the wins and losses, think about if that was your daughter that was involved in this, and she was at LSU and not being protected. Some of these were other athletes, and those coaches went to those families and said, I will protect your daughter when she comes to LSU. And of course, that didn't happen. So some of these individuals were working within the athletic department, and the athletic department did protect them as well. What do you think happens here?
Well, there's so much to unwrap there. What you said at the end is the most important part to the big picture of life and right and wrong, no doubt about it. And people who are responsible need to pay for it by any means possible to bring it to light what they did and why they did it. Now, just looking at it from what we do, right, most of the time, what I do all the time, just looking from a sports perspective, yes, the NCAA might throw this log additionally on the fire to try to punish LSU for everything that roots back to. And none of this football stuff comes out to light as far as the NCAA's eyes goes if this school, this athletic department, were not standing by Will Wade, who's basically been caught red-handed.
Right.
I mean, allegedly, but let's be real. Getting on the radar for, hey, the NCAA is hypocritical. They know big-time programs are paying players in major sports. But to be caught publicly in an embarrassing way by the FBI and HBO and national television, national outlets, that's a completely different story. And they clearly want Will Wade out. The LSU's trying to take these self-imposed sanctions for that already to try to get the heat off, but now you have these issues with Title IX and handling things miserably. So I think the NCAA is going to come back to LSU again and say, hey, nice that you've done what you've done already, but it's going to come back to you. You're still going to stand by Will Wade? Because that's the guy who has nothing to do with the Title IX issues and these violations. that have been alleged, he needs to go. I hate to say it, for LSU fans are going to be mad at me because they really want to stand behind him, and they say, basketball's dirty, you don't win without doing this. They're going to keep saying that. I get it. Most are. Others aren't, but most are. They're going to have to sacrifice him at some point, or football's going to pay for it. So fans, boosters, they need to understand the NCAA has enough now to really come down on LSU hard from an athletic perspective, and they need to make a real decision about it. Yeah, I think otherwise, others in the athletic department better have their I's dotted and their T's crossed as far as how they handle these situations from documentation. That's going to be huge. It's going to take a long time for that to come to light because these are the allegations from the outside. How did LSU handle documentation of them on the inside? Because that's going to determine exactly how the lack of institutional control tag can be applied here. It really looks like it's going to be higher up the chain, though. I'm guessing LSU documented it from an athletic department standpoint enough to CYA. But it's disgusting how it was handled overall in the school, and the law is going to have to step in if even half of what we're hearing is true.
There's no doubt. That's why I talked about the grand jury or federal investigation. Got to give Tulane some love here, okay? Even with the last few minutes of the program, they take on Tulsa tonight. Again, another top 25 team. They're winners of 3 in a row, 5-4 with overall, 2-4 in the conference. 38-12 winner over number 25 Army, snapping a 36-year losing streak against top 25 teams. Your thoughts on the Greenies?
Rousing success the whole season has been because you found a quarterback of the future. Now Tulane fans that I took to are terrified that somebody's going to try to poach Michael Pratt as a transfer. Look, that's not going to happen. You're going to have him going into next year to be able to build upon what Willie Fritz figured out. How are we going to take the next step? How are we going to go from a team that's just battling to make a bowl to be a team that could potentially win our conference? We need to have an open offense. We need to be able to be balanced. We need to scare people with the passing game. We're recruiting good enough receivers. Just sent one in Mooney to the NFL. Have several really good ones now. We need to be able to have a true modern spread offense. They've got it, and it's only going to get better as a true freshman has experience and becomes a sophomore. Absolutely love what's happened for them, no matter what happens in these final 2 games, and I think they can win them both for sure. They're going to move forward and be a team that can take that next step because we've talked about it. Recruiting has been good enough. I worry a little bit about the defense taking a step back next year because of the great pass rushers they're going to lose. That's going to hurt. But if you're a team that can suddenly go and match score for score with the other top teams in the league, it gives you a fighting chance to be able to play for the very top of the conference. Tulane's got enough talent there on offense now with an offensive line that's maturing too to be able to protect Pratt, to have real excitement for what next year can be no matter how this year finishes.
Biggest difference so far is, again, the play of the defense down the stretch here, and of course the ability to have a quarterback that can throw the football accurately.
Right, and it's the defense being put in better situations. I thought they were in a great situation at Houston. They scored 2 defensive touchdowns, and then they blow it. So that's really inexcusable. But a lot of times otherwise, the inconsistency of the offense in a league against teams where you wind up getting into higher scoring games, it becomes a snowball effect and has hurt them. But yeah, they started slow. I think they made some adjustments in the secondary. They were having the same problem LSU's having, the Saints were having earlier this year, too many blown assignments. That has improved. And if that finishes through the rest of the year, that's something they can continue to build on as well. You can't give up easy plays. They've gotten better at that, and they absolutely had to put this winning streak together.
No doubt about it. Jude, as always, appreciate the time. One of the reasons why I want to get Jude on today, he can talk it all. He did a fabulous job, as always. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program at 6 o'clock on tonight, every Thursday at 6 o'clock, also on Friday night. 9 o'clock on Pelican Sports Television, 10 o'clock on WLAE. We're back on the Deuce. That's WLAE-TV 2. That is Saturdays at 2 a.m., also on Thursday nights at 10 p.m. Also, you can check us out on Pelican Sports Television on Saturdays at 5 p.m. So a lot of ways to catch this show, including on the WLAE-TV YouTube page and at ericasher.com. You catch me on the radio, also with this guy as well, on 106.1 FM. I'm on 4 to 6 weekdays, leading into All Access, which is 6 to 7, with Ken Trahan and Jude Young. Again, you can listen live at ericasher.com, and we also have the podcasts up, Anchor, Apple, all of your podcasting platforms. Drugs. You can check out The Daily Show on the podcast as well. Again, special thanks to Jude Young for joining us on the program tonight. Also, the WLE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Tommy O'Connor, Tommy Fairley, and my director, William Hill. I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll check you out for another week of great sports talk next week here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Have a great week.